The title of today's message is Thomas, My Fair Lady, and the Great State of Missouri. What an unusual combination of people and things, don't you think? What a strange title for a sermon. I lumped those things together because they really do have something in common. Let's take a closer look. I'm guessing you've never heard the name Willard Duncan Van Diver, which is interesting because he's famous for something almost all of us learned in school at one time or another, and most of us remember to this day. More than 120 years ago, in 1896 to be exact, Willard Duncan Van Diver was elected to the United States House of Representatives, which he served in until 1905. Although he was originally from West Virginia, he moved with his parents to the state of Missouri early in life, where he became a proud Missourian. He grew up to be a science professor and eventually a college president. But one day he decided to get involved in politics. In fact, he became a respected and outspoken leader in the Democratic Party, serving in a variety of positions. It was when he was elected to Congress that he made his biggest impact. In the most memorable speech of his career, he said something that you and I likely speak of to this day. The speech was delivered in the year 1899, spoken in response to something the governor of Iowa said that Van Diver found highly questionable. Here's what Congressman Van Diver defiantly said. "I come from a state that raises corn and cotton, cockleburs and Democrats, and frothy eloquence neither convinces nor satisfies me. I'm from Missouri, and you have got to show me." You know what happened after that, right? Missouri came to be known as the Show Me State. So, what does that have to do with My Fair Lady? Well, as you probably know, My Fair Lady is a famous Broadway musical which later became a movie. It's about a woman named Eliza Doolittle, a young, unsophisticated Cockney girl. Along comes a snobbish and proper phonetics professor named Henry Higgins, who makes a bet that he can give Eliza Doolittle speech lessons and in the process transform her into a classy woman who talks and acts as if she was born and raised in high society. By the way, Audrey Hepburn and Rex Harrison were the actors who made those roles famous. In any event, there's one scene in the play where Eliza Doolittle is falling in love and the guy she's in love with just wants to talk. Well, Eliza has had enough talk. After all she gets all day long is lessons in how to talk properly. She's fed up, she wants action, so she sings this song.
Words, I'm so sick of words. I get words all day through, first from him, now from you. Is that all you blighters can do? Don't talk of stars burning above. If you're in love, show me. Tell me no dreams filled with desire. If you're on fire, show me. Show me. Show me. Show me now.
See, there it is again. Show me. Which brings me to Thomas. He wasn't there the day Jesus somehow miraculously slipped into a room where the doors were supposedly jammed and locked shut. Jesus was supposed to be dead. Somehow, Jesus showed up in the room and said to the disciples, "Peace be with you." He breathed on them and gave them their marching orders to go into the world and make a difference. Thomas wasn't there when that happened. When he returned from wherever he was, the disciples couldn't wait to tell him what had happened and what they had seen. According to the Bible's telling of it, this is how Thomas responded, and given the circumstances, I'm not sure I would have been any different. Thomas furrowed his brows, put on his most skeptical look, put one hand on his hip, and with the other hand wagged a finger, and he defiantly declared, "Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands, and put my finger in the mark of the nails, and my hand in his side, I will not believe." In other words, Show me. And that's what Thomas, my fair lady, and the great state of Missouri have in common. Show me. Prove it to me. Convince me it's true. They all have a reputation for being reluctant to buy in without clear and convincing proof. I find it fascinating that the first Sunday after Easter is traditionally observed as Doubting Thomas Sunday, a day when Christians all over the world read Thomas' story and hear about this man who so stubbornly insisted, "Unless I see with my own eyes and touch with my own hands." Most church leaders caution against being like Thomas. You don't need proof, just believe. I wonder, though, if Thomas hasn't gotten a bad and unfair rap all these years. Was he really that bad? Was what he did and said that day all that unreasonable? His real name was Didymus, which means the twin. He did some fantastic things that he should be remembered for. For example, he traveled farther than any other disciple to tell the world about Jesus. This very day, he's considered to be the patron saint of India because of how much time he spent there. Yet to most Christians, he will always be known as the greatest doubter of all time because of what he said to his friends who saw Jesus when he didn't. Show me, prove it, convince me. Let's go back to that first time Jesus came to the disciples. They had gone to hide in a locked room because they were scared sick that what happened to Jesus was going to happen to them next. In fact, they probably have very good reason to be petrified. They probably were next. So the fact that they were hiding should come as no surprise to anyone. But leave it to Jesus to make the insanely unimaginable happen. Supposedly dead, Jesus suddenly appeared in that locked and boarded up room as if to make a point that what God wants, God gets, even if a deadbolt, pun intended, tries to get in the way. Jesus says to these cowering disciples, "Peace. I'm with you. Don't be afraid. I'll go with you. Just go out and do what God has called and sent you to do." Now you would think the physical presence of Jesus, who was supposed to be dead, and his clear voice saying, "It's okay, I'm with you," would be more than enough to get you to open the door and at least go outside for a little stroll in the fresh air. But oh no. After 7 days, these disciples are still crammed in that same room with that same door still jammed and locked shut, still afraid, still paralyzed, still incapable of taking even the simplest risk of moving, despite seeing Jesus with their own eyes. So Jesus comes to them again, only this time Thomas is present. Thomas, the one who said, "Yeah, right, Jesus was here. Who you kidding? I'll believe it when I see it with my own eyes." Careful what you wish for. Jesus gives Thomas exactly what he wants. "Put your finger here. See my hands," Jesus says. "Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Don't doubt, but believe." Now maybe we call Thomas the doubter because, after all, Jesus himself told Thomas to stop doubting. In any event, I think we should cut Thomas some slack. Maybe it's not so much that he was a doubter. He was a realist. He was raised to have no filters. It was his very nature to call something what it is. If he didn't believe something was true, or if he couldn't understand something, he said so. He challenged it. He asked questions, sometimes very direct questions. Is that all that bad? Remember the last time he had supper with Jesus? Jesus wanted to talk about dying. Jesus said he would be leaving soon, but it wouldn't be forever. He said he would prepare a place for the disciples as soon as he got where he was going, and one day they'd all be together again. "You know the way to where I'm going," Jesus says in the 14th chapter of John's Gospel. When Jesus said that, nobody dared breathe a word, except Thomas, who blurted out what everyone else must have been thinking. "Personally, Lord, we have no idea where you're going. How can we know the way if we don't even know where you're going?" That was a great question. The other disciples were probably all nodding, at least privately. "I am the way," Jesus said. And although Thomas let it go at that, you can't help but think he probably found that answer less than satisfactory too. One thing you've got to say about Thomas, though, when he did get the proof he was after, he was all in. When Jesus stood there and showed Thomas his hands and let Thomas touch his side, Thomas couldn't even dream up another question. All he could say was, "My Lord and my God." And you have to admit there's something wonderful about that. It was after that Thomas went to what was believed at the time to be the far ends of the known earth to tell the story of Jesus. Jesus went on to give a special blessing to those in future generations who would never have the benefit of seeing and touching and hearing a physical Jesus like Thomas did. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe, Jesus said. Of course, he was talking about people like you and me. Dr. Spencer Silver was a scientist whose specialty was, of all things, glue. Now, why certain scientists get fascinated with certain things, who knows? But this guy got fascinated with glue. So for years and years, he worked and worked and worked in his lab until one day he created the formula for what he believed was going to be the next great super glue. Only problem is, when all the chemistry was done and the first batch of this new glue came out, it was at best a low-tack substance, which in scientific glue terms apparently means it was next to worthless. It wouldn't stick anything together, except perhaps for one piece of paper to another, and even then only temporarily. Dr. Silver became very depressed. His life's ambition and work had been a waste. What good am I as a scientist, he wondered. He got very down on himself. Then one day a colleague of his, Dr. Art Fry, came along and suggested that maybe there was a use for this low-tack substance after all. Maybe it could be used to stick bookmarks to Bibles. Nice idea, but how big a market is there for something like that? Sure, my bookmark falls out of my Bible whenever I open it, but that doesn't mean I'm going to go out and spend $10 on a bookmark that'll stick to a page temporarily. So that idea didn't get very far. But the two of them did come up with this idea. Why not spread a little of the glue on one end of a piece of paper, stick it to another piece of paper, and to another, and to another, and to another, and so on, so as to create a stack of papers that you can put by your phone or on your desk to peel off when you need one. It was a great idea, so they took the only thing they had available at the time, a big stack of yellow scratch paper, and they started gluing and stacking. Unfortunately, it didn't take long to figure out that the glue made the stack of papers substantially fatter on the glue side than the opposite side, which not only didn't look good, but it really wasn't very practical either. They were about to give up when yet another scientist said, "Well, why don't you just shave the glue end of the paper just enough to offset the thickness of the glue?" And that's what they did. They eventually contracted with 3M to develop a process to make it happen. And in 1977, Post-it notes, or sticky notes, were born. And today they're present in almost every home, school, and workplace. A great invention that wouldn't have happened without a dream, without persistence and teamwork and experimentation, and it wouldn't have happened without doubt and uncertainty and discouragement and even failure. It's not a bad thing that Thomas doubted, if that's even the right word to describe it. If anything, it led Jesus to come to the disciples again and to specifically say to Thomas, "Okay, here you go. Here's what you asked for." Jesus doesn't ask perfection of any of us. I think Jesus may even smile at our reluctance sometimes to take risks and act with blind faith. Even so, his words are as urgent and intentional now as they were to his disciples 2,000 years ago. "As the Father has sent me," he says, "so I send you." Did you ever think of that? You are a sent one. Yes, one with human flaws. Yes, someone with an occasional mistake or failure in your past, and most likely in your future. But despite that, it's you God has chosen and sent. The enormity of it is enough sometimes to make a person want to run and hide, like the disciples. Believe me, I know. But in Thomas, we see that we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to worry about being afraid. We only have to be faithful and trusting. We can go with our frailties and uncertainties, knowing that neither doubt nor mistakes can keep God from using us to do important and wonderful, and yes, sometimes very surprising and unexpected things in the kingdom. Do you believe that's true? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe.